You have to be as quiet as possible. Follow my lead and we will reach Arinseo in peace.
Okay, let's go.
My love, please open the gates. We need to reach somewhere tonight.
Be back before morning.
Come. The kingdom sleeps.
I see the lanterns.
Guards on the rooftops. Stay close.
I am with you.
What is happening here? The king and the court lady.
Who is there?
Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. So this is the face behind this channel. If you love emotional biracial love stories, family drama, mysteries, you are in the right place. Please, if you are new, do not forget to subscribe, like, and share your comment. Leave your comments. I always appreciate them. Thank you, and let's dive right back into the story.
Morning spread slowly across the palace grounds, washing the stone paths and wooden halls in pale golden light. Servants hurried through the courtyards, carrying water, folded silk, trays of food, and baskets of fresh herbs before the senior officials awoke. In the royal palace of Haryun, peace existed only on the surface. Beneath the beauty lived fear, rules, and the constant pressure to never make mistakes. And among the people most feared inside those walls was the head court lady herself, Lady Han Soyeon. Even her name was enough to silence whispers. She was a woman in her late 30s, admired for her beauty and feared for her cold discipline. Her long, dark hair was always perfectly arranged beneath expensive hairpins of jade and silver. Her robes were elegant but severe, just like the woman wearing them. Everything about her looked controlled. Her posture, her voice, even the way she walked. Some said she had once come from a respected noble family before earning the king's trust through absolute loyalty. Others believe she became powerful simply because her heart was harder than most men in court. That morning, dozens of maidens stood in straight lines beneath the courtyard pavilion, while Lady Soyeon slowly walked before them with sharp eyes. No one dared lift their heads fully when she passed. The sound of her shoes against the stone floor alone was enough to tighten nerves. "You." Her voice cut through the silence sharply. A young servant immediately stepped forward, trembling slightly. Lady Soyeon looked over the tray in the girl's hands with a visible disappointment. "The crown prince returns after weeks away, and this is how carelessly you prepare the morning tea." The servant quickly lowered herself. "Forgive me, Court Lady Han," but the older woman showed no sympathy. Forgiveness does not correct incompetence. Without warning, she pushed the tray from the girl's hands. Cups shattered across the stone floor. The sound echoed through the courtyard, making several maidens flinch quietly. "Clean it!" The girl immediately dropped to her knees. Lady Soyeon continued walking as though nothing had happened. She stopped before another servant. "You stitched this robe?" "Yes, court lady." A blind woman could have done better. The servant's eyes watered, but she kept her head lowered. Fear lived openly in that courtyard, and Serin felt it too. She stood silently among the others, trying her best not to draw attention. But her mind was far from calm. Everything still felt unreal. The palace, the servants, the prince she had seen only moments ago. Her heart still had not recovered from that shock. Did I really time travel? The question kept repeating inside her mind, no matter how hard she tried to push it away. Then suddenly, Lady Soyeon stopped walking. Right in front of her, the courtyard became even quieter. Serin slowly lifted her eyes just enough to see the older woman standing before her. Lady Soyeon studied her carefully, not kindly, coldly, like someone examining a problem. "So," she finally said, the useless girl finally decides to stand again. A few maidens lowered their eyes further. No one spoke. Serin felt heat rise in her chest but remained silent. Lady Soyeon took another slow step closer. "I hear you caused trouble the other day near the Western Hall." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Falling during work hours like a careless child." Serin swallowed quietly. "Aye," but the woman cut her off immediately. "You missed your duties. Others covered your work while you slept peacefully." Her voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. In this palace, servants who cannot perform simple tasks become burdens. The words landed heavily. Serin lowered her gaze again, trying not to say the wrong thing. She still understood almost nothing about this place. One mistake could expose her completely. Lady Soyen continued staring at her for a long moment. Then her lips curved slightly, not into a smile, into something colder. "You should be grateful," the prince returned. Serin frowned slightly before she could stop herself. The older woman noticed immediately. "It distracted the palace from your foolish behavior." A few servants nearby shifted nervously. Lady Soyan turned away, but then paused once more. "And fix your posture," she added without looking back. "You stand as though you do not belong here." The words struck deeper than Serin expected, because they were true. She did not belong there, not in that palace, not in that time. Lady Soyan finally moved on, continuing her inspection while assigning duties sharply across the courtyard. But Serin barely heard any of it anymore. Her chest felt tight, her thoughts raced endlessly. Then suddenly, another voice broke into her thoughts. "You." Serin looked up quickly. One of the senior palace attendants stood before her. "The head court lady has assigned you to the Eastern Library halls today." The girl beside Serin gasped softly under her breath. Even the other servants looked surprised. Serin noticed immediately. Something about that assignment was wrong. And before she could ask why, the attendant spoke again. "You will begin by cleaning the Crown Prince's private study." Serin froze completely. Serin stood frozen long after the palace attendant walked away. "The Crown Prince's private study," she repeated quietly under her breath. Beside her, the young maiden who had first helped her that morning looked equally shocked. Her eyes quickly darted around the courtyard before she moved closer to Serin. "Do not look so frightened," she whispered urgently. Serin finally turned toward her properly. For the first time since waking in that strange place, she truly looked at the girl standing beside her. She was beautiful in a soft and natural way. Not the polished beauty of noble women dressed in jewels, but the kind shaped by kindness and hardship. Her eyes were gentle, yet careful, like someone who had learned long ago to think before speaking. "What is your name?" Serin asked quietly. The girl blinked in surprise, then suddenly laughed under her breath. "You truly are behaving strangely today." Serin remained serious. The maiden studied her face for a moment, before answering softly, "My name is Yuna." Serin repeated it slowly in her mind. Yuna. The name somehow suited her gentle voice. Yuna shook her head with a small smile. "You ask me my name as though we only just met." She leaned slightly closer. "You are the closest thing I have to a sister in this palace." Those words made Serin pause. Yuna continued walking beside her as the other maidens returned to their duties. "Ever since they brought you here, we have shared everything together." Her expression softened slightly. "Food, work, punishments." Something about the way she said it made Serin's chest tighten quietly. This girl truly knew the other Serin, the real one, or maybe the version of her that belonged to this time. As they crossed one of the smaller palace paths, Serin lowered her voice carefully. "Yuna." The girl looked at her. "Where are my people?" Yuna frowned slightly. "My people," Serin continued softly. "The tribe of Erinseo." The moment those words left her mouth, Yuna's expression changed completely. The warmth disappeared from her face almost instantly. She grabbed Serin's wrist quickly and lowered her voice. "Do not say that name here." Her tone carried real fear now. Serin looked confused. "Why?" Yuna glanced around nervously before pulling her away from the open walkway. They moved behind one of the quieter storage halls where fewer servants passed. Only then did she finally release her wrist. "There are eyes everywhere in this palace," Yuna whispered sharply. "Walls listen here. Even servants disappear for saying less." Serin stared at her quietly. Yuna studied her again, concern slowly replacing fear. "You truly cannot remember anything, can you?" she asked softly. Serin hesitated. She did not know how to answer. Yuna sighed quietly and leaned against the wooden pillar beside them. "The survivors of Erinseo still live," she finally said. "But not freely." Serin's heart tightened immediately. Yuna continued carefully, making sure no one was nearby. After the royal army destroyed their lands, the people who survived were moved to the southern edge of the kingdom, near the lower district of Baekwan. "Baekwan? The palace calls it a settlement," Yuna said bitterly. "But everyone knows what it truly is." Her eyes lowered slightly. "A place hidden from the rest of the kingdom." Serin listened silently. "The survivors were allowed to live only after swearing loyalty to the crown," Yuna continued. "Royal guards watched the area constantly. No one enters or leaves without permission. A cold feeling slowly settled inside Serin's chest. Yuna looked away briefly before continuing. Most people in the capital pretend the tribe no longer exists. Others speak of them as though they brought misfortune to the kingdom. And the people there? Serin asked quietly. Yuna swallowed softly. They survive however they can. Her voice grew quieter now. Many work in the homes of wealthy families. Cleaning, carrying water, sewing, cooking. The men are sent for heavy labor near the outer farms and storage grounds. She paused briefly. They are watched closely. Paid little, respected even less. Serin felt something painful twist inside her chest. Yuna gave a small, humorless smile. My family lives there too. Serin looked up quickly. Yuna nodded. I was not born inside the palace. I came from the southern district near Baikwan. Her eyes softened slightly. The poor all live close together there. Former tribe families, workers, widows, abandoned children, people the nobles do not care to see. She let out a quiet breath. When I was younger, my mother used to say the kingdom shines brightest in the capital because all its suffering is hidden elsewhere. The words stayed with Serin, heavy, real. For the first time since arriving in that world, the story no longer felt distant. It was not just paintings anymore, not just history. These were real people, real pain, real lives crushed beneath a kingdom that still stood proudly above them. Then suddenly, Yuna straightened quickly. Footsteps, coming closer. She lowered her voice immediately. Enough questions for now. Serin noticed the fear returning to her face. Yuna quickly adjusted Serin's sleeves nervously. And whatever happens in the Crown Prince's study, she whispered carefully, do not touch anything you are not meant to touch. The warning lingered heavily between them, because the fear in Yuna's eyes made one thing painfully clear. Inside that palace, one wrong move could change everything. Yuna's words stayed with Serin long after they returned to work. The survivors of Orinseo watched, hidden away, treated like people whose existence embarrassed the kingdom itself. As Serin quietly cleaned the wooden shelves inside one of the palace corridors, pieces of the story she had once read inside the museum slowly began fitting together in her mind. The ruined tribe, the cruelty of the king, the fear inside the palace. None of it was fiction anymore. She was standing inside it, living it, and the more she listened, the more terrifying one thought became. What if this was why she came here? Her movements slowed. The cloth in her hands became still. The prophecy, the painting, the flash of light, the words from the old records returned clearly inside her mind. Truth buried by kings would one day rise again. She swallowed slowly. Rewrite the fate, she whispered faintly to herself. The idea sounded impossible, and yet nothing about her situation was possible anymore. Maybe she was sent there for a reason. Maybe history itself had pulled her back. Maybe she was meant to stop whatever tragedy was coming. But another thought quickly followed, one that frightened her even more. Was she truly Serin, or simply a stranger wearing her face? The question unsettled her deeply, because sometimes, for brief moments, things inside the palace felt strangely familiar. A hallway she somehow knew how to cross, a corner she turned before thinking, a feeling she could not explain whenever the prince's name was spoken. It was as if pieces of someone else's memories were quietly breathing beneath her own, and she did not know where Zoe ended, or where Serin began. By the time the sun began lowering behind the palace roofs, her thoughts had become too heavy to ignore any longer. She found Yuna near the servant quarters, sorting folded garments into baskets. Yuna, she called softly. The girl looked up immediately. Serin hesitated briefly before stepping closer. Please. Something in her voice made Yuna straighten. I need to see them. Yuna frowned slightly. See who? My people. Serin's eyes held hers firmly now. The survivors of Orinseo. Yuna quickly looked around before lowering her voice. You should not keep saying that name carelessly. I need to understand what is happening to me, Serin whispered. Everything feels wrong. I feel lost here. Her voice trembled slightly at the end, despite her effort to hide it. Yuna's expression softened immediately. For a moment, she simply stared at her friend with quiet worry. Then slowly she reached forward and held Serin's hands gently. I do not know what has happened to you since yesterday, she admitted softly. But I know something is troubling you deeply. Serin lowered her eyes briefly. Yuna sighed quietly. We cannot go now. The palace is still awake. She glanced toward the fading sky beyond the courtyard. But when dusk prayer ends and the evening drums sound, she lowered her voice further. We may be able to slip away before night inspection. Relief flickered briefly across Serin's face. Yuna quickly added, "Only for a short while. We must return before dawn bells, or Court Lady Han will notice we are gone." Serin nodded immediately. "Thank you." Yuna gave a small nervous smile. "You can thank me after we return alive." That evening moved painfully slowly for Serin. The palace gradually changed as daylight faded. Lanterns were lit across the halls. Guards rotated positions. Servants hurried to complete final tasks before night rules became stricter. And all through it, Serin's heart remained restless. Because deep down, she knew one thing for certain now. Whatever truth waited in Bakwan, it was connected to her. When the sky finally darkened and the deep sound of the evening drums echoed across the palace grounds, Yuna quietly appeared outside Serin's sleeping quarters. "Come," she whispered urgently. Serin followed immediately. The two girls moved carefully through the quieter side corridors of the palace, keeping close to the shadows whenever footsteps approached. Serin's heart pounded harder with every turn. Everything about sneaking through the royal palace felt dangerous. At one point, they stopped completely as two guards passed nearby carrying lanterns. Yuna quickly grabbed Serin's wrist and pulled her behind a wooden pillar until the men disappeared again. Only then did they continue moving. "You have done this before," Serin whispered quietly. Yuna looked ahead with a guilty smile. Not exactly alone. A few moments later, they finally reached one of the mighty outer gates of the palace. Towering wooden doors stood beneath torchlight, while royal guards remained stationed nearby with spears in hand. Serin immediately tensed, but Yuna suddenly relaxed. One of the younger guards had already noticed them approaching. His expression softened the moment he saw her. Yuna lowered her head shyly, and Serin instantly understood. The guard stepped closer carefully, pretending seriousness despite the warmth in his eyes. "You are late tonight," he murmured quietly to Yuna. "And you speak too much for a palace guard," she replied softly. Even in the darkness, Serin noticed the faint smile they both tried to hide. The guard glanced around cautiously before speaking again. "You must return before dawn watch changes." Yuna nodded quickly. "We will." His eyes briefly moved towards Serin. Something about her seemed to catch his attention for a second, but he said nothing. Finally, after making sure no senior officer was nearby, he stepped aside just enough for them to pass. "Go quickly," he whispered, "before someone sees." Yuna grabbed Serin's hand again, and together they slipped through the massive gates into the sleeping kingdom beyond the palace walls. The farther they moved from the palace, the quieter the kingdom became. The grand stone roads slowly disappeared behind them, replaced by smaller paths lit only by scattered lanterns and moonlight. The air felt different there. Less controlled, less watched, but somehow heavier with hidden sadness. Serin walked closely beside Yuna, her eyes quietly taking in everything around her. Small homes built close together, worn wooden fences, smoke rising from clay stoves outside narrow houses, people moving carefully through the night, tired from long days of labor. And yet, what surprised her most was not the suffering. It was the warmth. Despite everything the kingdom had taken from them, life still existed there, real life. Children still laughed while chasing each other through the narrow pathways. Old women sat outside weaving cloth together beneath lantern light. Some men gathered around small fires telling stories in low voices. Further ahead, a group of women softly sang. There was pain there, no doubt about it, but there was also resilience, the kind that refuses to disappear no matter how much the world tries to crush it. Serin slowed her steps slightly. Something about the place stirred emotions she could not explain. Not fear, not confusion. Something deeper, like returning to somewhere her soul already knew. Yuna noticed her expression and smiled faintly. "The palace sees this place as broken," she said quietly. "But people here still find ways to live." Serin nodded slowly, her eyes still moving across the settlement. Then suddenly, "Serin?" The voice came from behind them. Serin turned quickly. An older woman stood near one of the homes holding a basket against her side. The moment Serin saw her face, her heart nearly stopped. She knew that face, not from this place, from home, from the old photographs kept inside her family house in Zambara. Her breath caught instantly. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same eyes, the same smile, even the small mark near her cheek. It was her grandmother, or rather, a younger version of the woman she had known all her life. Serin stood frozen. The basket slipped slightly from the older woman's hands as surprise crossed her face. "Child?" she called again, confused by Serin's expression. but Serin barely heard her. Emotion rose so suddenly inside her chest that it hurt. Without thinking, she rushed forward and threw her arms around the woman tightly. The older woman gasped softly in surprise. Serin, for a moment she laughed warmly, trying to steady herself. Well, yes, it has been some time since you visited, but this hug feels as though we just met. Her voice carried gentle humor. But Serin's eyes had already begun filling with tears, because it truly felt like another lifetime. The older woman slowly pulled back just enough to look at her face properly. Her expression softened immediately. There now, she murmured quietly, touching Serin's cheek. What has the palace done to you? Serin could not answer. She simply stared at her in disbelief. The woman looked exactly like the old portraits back home. The same woman who used to call her Little Serin as a child. The same woman whose stories once sounded like myths. Only now, she was standing alive before her, young, real, and somehow unaware of what she would one day become in Serin's future. Yuna watched quietly from behind, immediately understanding that this reunion meant more than she understood. The older woman finally smiled again and gently held Serin's hand. Come inside quickly before the guards begin their rounds again. Her tone lowered slightly at the mention of guards. Even there, fear still lived among them. She glanced briefly toward Yuna and nodded kindly. You too, child. But Yuna shook her head softly. I should check on my mother before dawn. Then she looked back at Serin carefully. We must return before morning bells, she reminded her quietly. If Court Lady Han notices we are gone. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Serin nodded slowly. Yuna gave her one last reassuring smile before disappearing down one of the smaller paths between the homes. The older woman then gently guided Serin toward her house. Come, she said warmly. It has been too long since this home heard your voice. Serin stepped inside slowly, her heart beating harder with every second. Because deep down, she was beginning to realize something terrifying. This was not just history anymore. This was her family. The small house felt warm despite how simple it was. A clay lamp burned softly near the corner, while the smell of herbs and cooked roots filled the air. Outside, distant laughter and quiet singing still drifted through the settlement, like people trying to protect joy from a cruel world. Serin sat quietly on the floor mat while the older woman moved around preparing food for her. Every movement felt painfully familiar. The way she folded cloth, the way she hummed softly under her breath, even the way she touched things with gentle care. It reminded Serin too much of home, too much of the woman she had lost years ago. The older woman finally placed a wooden bowl before her and smiled warmly. You have become thinner since the palace took you, she said softly. Do they not feed servants there? Serin managed a faint smile. The woman sat across from her, watching carefully as though trying to measure how much had changed. How have you been, child? She asked gently. Has anyone mistreated you? Serin lowered her eyes briefly. There were too many answers to that question. Instead, she quietly asked, Grandmother. The older woman looked up immediately. How are my parents? The room suddenly became still. The warmth on the older woman's face faded almost instantly. Pain replaced it, deep pain. Serin noticed it immediately. The woman slowly placed down the cloth in her hands. Serin, her voice softened sadly. Why would you ask me something so painful tonight? Serin's heart tightened. The older woman sighed quietly and looked away for a moment, as if forcing herself to revisit a wound she never truly healed from. You know how much their deaths broke this family. Serin remained silent. The woman continued softly. Your parents traveled north years ago to answer a healing request from one of the smaller villages loyal to the crown. Her eyes darkened slightly. They never returned. Serin felt cold all over. The older woman's fingers tightened around the fabric in her lap. The kingdom claimed bandits attacked them along the mountain roads. She shook her head slowly, but many of us never believed that story. Her voice lowered now. Your father and mother were high keepers of Oninye. Wise, respected, loved by the people. There was pride in her voice. Despite the grief, they would never have allowed this tribe to fall quietly beneath the king's cruelty. Her expression hardened faintly. Someone feared them. The words landed heavily inside Serin, because suddenly, everything began connecting. The destroyed tribe, the dead high keepers, the lies written into history. This was not random. Someone had planned it carefully, long before the kingdom moved openly against Oninye. Her stomach tightened painfully. The tragedy had already begun long before Serin ever arrived in this time. The older woman noticed the change in her expression and frowned slightly. You have been asking strange questions since you arrived tonight, she said carefully. And you keep staring at me as though you were seeing a ghost. Serin quickly forced a small smile. I hit my head yesterday at the palace, she explained softly. Everything still feels blurry. Concern immediately returned to the older woman's face. Ah, she moved closer at once. That foolish palace work. She gently touched Serin's forehead again, as though checking for fever. You should have told me sooner. Serin lowered her gaze, guilt quietly settling inside her chest. She hated lying to her, but how could she possibly explain the truth? How could she tell them she came from centuries ahead? That she knew parts of their future already? They would think she had lost her mind. Or worse, before either of them could speak again, the door curtains suddenly shifted open. A tall, elderly man stepped inside slowly. The room changed the moment he entered. Not through fear, through presence. He wore long weathered robes made from dark woven cloth, and thick, silver-threaded dreadlocks rested over his shoulders like marks of age and wisdom. Wooden charms and carved stones hung around his neck, softly clicking together whenever he moved. His eyes looked old, older than the kingdom itself. The older woman immediately brightened. Ah, Elder Zorakai, she said warmly, standing to greet him. The name struck Serin instantly. Zorakai. Her breath caught quietly. She knew that name, from the museum records, from the notes hidden between the pages. The seer of Arinseo, the man whispered about in stories, the one believed to see beyond ordinary time. Serin stared at him carefully, her heartbeat slowly rising again. This was him, the man connected to the prophecy. Questions rushed through her mind all at once. Did he know who she really was? Did he know she came from the future? Could he explain why she was there? But fear stopped her from speaking, because how could she possibly say such things aloud? Even to him, it sounded impossible. Elder Zorakai slowly turned his attention toward her. The moment his eyes met hers, something strange happened. He did not look surprised, not even slightly. Instead, he looked at her the way someone looks at a traveler finally arriving after a very long journey. The older woman smiled warmly beside them. She finally came to visit us after all this time, but the old man barely looked away from Serin. Slowly, he stepped closer. Serin's chest tightened. For one brief moment, she almost believed he truly knew everything. Then gently, without saying a word at first, he took her hands into his. His palms felt warm, despite his age. And in a calm voice that somehow reached deeper than ordinary words, he said softly, "Do not fear the path your spirit remembers before your mind does." Serin froze completely. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter. Her eyes widened slightly, but before she could ask what he meant, the old man simply gave her hands a comforting squeeze. Then he smiled faintly. Even lost rivers eventually remember where they belong. And with that, he released her hands and slowly walked further inside the house, leaving Serin sitting there in stunned silence. Because deep down, it felt like he had just spoken directly to the secret she had been hiding inside her heart. The night grew quieter as the hours slowly passed. Outside the small house, the sounds of the settlement softened one after another until only the distant crackling of firewood and quiet evening songs remained. Inside, warmth filled the room gently. For the first time since arriving in that strange world, Serin no longer felt completely afraid. Confused, yes. Lost, deeply. But not alone. Her grandmother sat beside her, slowly combing her fingers through her hair, the way mothers comfort frightened children after long days. It was such a simple thing, yet it broke something inside Serin, because she had missed this feeling without realizing how much. The safety, the softness, the quiet love. "You should rest for a little while," her grandmother whispered gently. "Your eyes look tired." Serin wanted to stay awake. She still had too many questions, too many thoughts running endlessly through her mind, but the warmth of her grandmother's lap slowly pulled her into peace she had not felt in a very long time. Before she even realized it, her eyes closed, and sleep quietly took her, but the darkness that followed was not ordinary sleep. At first, there was only silence, then light, soft golden light. Serin slowly opened her eyes. She was no longer inside the house. She stood barefoot in a vast garden, unlike anything she had ever seen before. The air itself felt alive there. Silver streams flowed gently beneath crystal bridges. Trees with pale blossoms stretched endlessly beneath a sky, glowing like early dawn. Petals drifted through the wind without ever touching the ground, as though time itself moved differently there. Everything felt peaceful, too peaceful. Serin turned slowly, trying to understand where she was. Then she heard it. Serin, the voice echoed softly around her. She turned quickly. 3 figures stood not far from her beneath a flowering tree. 2 women dressed in flowing garments marked with the ancient symbols of Arinseo. Beside them stood an elderly Korean man, wearing royal robes touched by age and wisdom. None of them looked frightening, but something about them felt beyond ordinary life. Serin's heartbeat slowly quickened. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. The older woman stepped forward first. Her eyes carried deep sadness, but also warmth. "You already know us," she said gently. The younger woman beside her smiled faintly. "Even if your mind still struggles to understand." Serin stared at them carefully. Then, slowly, realization began to form. Not through memory, through feeling. The older woman looked at her the same way her grandmother did. The younger woman's smile somehow reminded her of herself. And the old Korean man carried the calm presence of someone tied to ancient truths. Fear slowly crept into Serin's chest. "This is real," she whispered. The elderly man finally spoke. His voice was deep but gentle. "Yes." Serin swallowed hard. "Did I really travel through time?" Silence followed for a moment. Then, the older woman stepped closer. "You crossed through memory, fate, and unfinished pain," she answered softly. "The world you knew and the world before it are now tied together." Serin's breathing became uneven. "I do not understand." "You were brought here because history was broken," the younger woman explained carefully. "Not every story written by kings is truth." The old man continued calmly. "The fall of Arinseo was not destiny." Those words struck her deeply. Serin's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" The man lifted his gaze toward the glowing garden around them. "Long ago, greed, fear, and betrayal poisoned the kingdom of Heryun. Innocent blood paid the price." The older woman's expression darkened with quiet grief. The people of Arinseo were blamed for sins they did not commit. "The prince," Serin whispered carefully. "The story said." "The story lied," the younger woman interrupted softly. Serin froze. Everything inside her suddenly felt heavier. The paintings, the records, the betrayal. So much of it had been twisted. The elderly man slowly approached her now. "History remembers endings," he said quietly, "but very few people ever ask who created them." Serin shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "Why me?" The older woman's eyes softened deeply. "Because your spirit was always tied to hers." Serin's chest tightened immediately. Hers? The first Serin. The garden became still around her. "You are not simply wearing her face," the younger woman explained. "You carry the echo of her soul." Serin felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. "So, what am I supposed to do?" The 3 figures exchanged quiet looks before the elderly man finally answered. The prophecy was never about revenge. His voice deepened slightly. It was about truth. The older woman stepped closer. "You were brought here to rewrite what fear and power destroyed. To change fate before blood seals it forever," the younger woman finished softly. Serin's breathing trembled. "But how?" The old man looked toward her calmly. "That answer will reveal itself step by step." He paused briefly. "But remember this carefully, Serin." His voice echoed deeper now. "You cannot change fate without paying the price of knowing it." The wind around the garden suddenly grew stronger. The glowing petals began rising rapidly into the air. The peaceful garden slowly started fading around her. Serin looked around in panic. "Wait!" she called out desperately. "Please do not leave yet." But the figures were already beginning to disappear into light. Only one final voice reached her clearly. "Before the moon turns red." Then everything vanished. Serin gasped sharply as her eyes flew open. The small house returned around her instantly. The soft lamp, the quiet fire, her grandmother's lap beneath her head. Her breathing came fast and uneven, as though she had truly traveled somewhere far away. Her grandmother looked down at her with concern immediately. "You were dreaming," she said softly. "You kept whispering in your sleep." Serin slowly sat up, still shaken by everything she had heard. It had felt too real to dismiss, too clear. Her eyes moved toward the doorway, where the night sky remained dark outside. Then suddenly she remembered. The palace. Her chest tightened immediately. "I have to go," she said quickly. Her grandmother frowned slightly. "So soon? If they notice I am missing." Serin whispered anxiously. "There will be trouble." Sadness briefly crossed the older woman's face, but she nodded with understanding. "Then go carefully, child." She gently fixed Serin's hair one last time, before holding her face soft. softly between her hands. "No matter what that palace turns into," she whispered warmly, "never forget who you are." Those words stayed heavy inside Serin's chest. Outside, Yuna was already waiting nervously near the path. "We need to leave now," she whispered urgently. "The next guard watch begins soon." Serin nodded quickly before turning back one last time toward the small house. Her grandmother still stood at the doorway, watching her with loving eyes. And somehow, that hurt more than leaving home ever did. The journey back felt even more dangerous than before. The streets had grown quieter now, making every sound easier to notice. Every passing guard made Serin's heart jump, but once again, the young royal guard waiting near the outer gates helped them quietly. The moment he saw Yuna approaching, relief crossed his face. "You returned late," he whispered nervously while opening a smaller side entrance through the gates. Yuna smiled softly. "And yet you still waited." The guard shook his head with a faint smile of his own. Then quickly, before anyone else noticed, the two girls slipped back inside the palace walls. But as Serin walked through the dark palace corridors once more, the dream's final warning still echoed painfully inside her mind. Before the moon turns red. The palace corridors felt colder after that night, not because the weather had changed, but because Serin had changed. As she walked quietly beside Yuna through the sleeping halls before dawn, her mind no longer fought against the impossible truth. She had traveled through time. Somehow, fate itself had pulled her into a story that was never supposed to be forgotten. At first, she only wanted answers. Then she wanted to escape. But now she understood something deeper. She was there for a reason. The dream had made that painfully clear. The fall of Oninye was not destiny. It was planned, twisted. Buried beneath lies, powerful people wanted the world to believe forever. Serin slowly lifted her eyes toward the dark palace ahead of them. This kingdom looked beautiful from the outside. Its grand walls, its shining halls, its royal banners dancing proudly beneath torchlight. But beneath all that beauty, something rotten lived there, something dangerous. And somehow, she had been dragged into the middle of it. A quiet fear still lived inside her. What if she failed? What if history repeated itself exactly the same way? But another thought slowly grew stronger inside her heart. What if she could truly change things? What if she could stop whatever tragedy destroyed the first Serin? Her chest tightened softly. Maybe she could finally return home. Back to her real life. Back to the modern world. Back to the version of herself that existed before all this madness began. But until then, she had a mission now. Not revenge, not anger, truth. And somewhere deep inside her, she silently made herself a promise. No matter how painful this journey became, she would uncover what really happened to Oninye, even if the kingdom itself tried to stop her. But while Serin struggled to understand her place inside the past, a different storm was already growing within the palace walls. Far from the servant quarters and hidden beneath the eastern royal chambers, a secret meeting hall glowed beneath low candlelight. Only a few people in the entire kingdom were permitted inside that room, and seated at the center of it all was the king himself. King Seonmu of Haryun, the ruler feared across the kingdom. Even in old age, power still clung heavily to him. His sharp eyes carried the coldness of a man who trusted no one completely. Gold rings rested across his fingers while expensive silk robes flowed around him like living proof of the wealth he had built during his reign. Before him stretched a feast large enough to feed an entire village. Roasted meats, imported wine, silver dishes overflowing with fruit and rare spices. Around the long table sat powerful officials, laughing quietly beneath the warm glow of lanterns. And standing closest to the king himself was the man many feared, almost as much as the throne. Lord Kang Daejin, Chief Royal Chancellor of Haryun, the most powerful man in the kingdom after the king himself. The Kang family name alone carried influence strong enough to shake entire provinces. For years, whispers followed Daejin wherever he walked. Some called him a genius. Others called him dangerous. But everyone agreed on one thing: without Lord Kang, King Seonmu may never have ascended the throne at all. When nobles once questioned the king's fitness to rule, it was Kang Daejin who crushed opposition quietly behind palace walls. Some rivals disappeared, some suddenly changed loyalties, and some were never seen again. After that, no one challenged the throne openly again. Now the two men sat together like kings, sharing the same crown. The king lifted his wine cup slowly, satisfaction visible on his face. "To Oninye," he said coldly. the proud tribe that finally learned its place. Several officials laughed quietly. Lord Kang Daejin smiled faintly, but said nothing immediately. The king continued, "Their lands alone have tripled trade through the southern routes." One official quickly added, "The healing herbs found within their mountains now sell for 3 times their original value in neighboring kingdoms." Another nodded eagerly, "And the crystal rivers beneath their lands continue producing rare minerals faster than expected." The king leaned back with clear satisfaction. "Resources wasted for generations beneath primitive traditions," he scoffed. Now they finally served the crown properly. Soft agreement spread around the table. Only Lord Kang remained quieter than the others, watching, thinking. The king finally turned toward him. "You were right about them." Lord Kang slowly lifted his cup. "The people of Orinseo were powerful," he answered calmly. "As long as their highkeepers remained alive, they would never fully kneel to the throne." His voice remained smooth, controlled. They loved their traditions more than the kingdom itself. The king gave a dark chuckle. "And now their traditions belong to us." A few officials laughed again, but Lord Kang's eyes remained unreadable, because unlike the others, he understood something dangerous. The tribe's destruction was never simply about land or wealth. It was about control. The gifts of Orinseo frightened the throne long before war ever began. Their healing knowledge, their spiritual seers, their influence among the people. Too many began trusting Orinseo more than the crown itself. And powerful kings do not tolerate divided loyalty. The feast continued deeper into the night until eventually the officials began leaving one after another. Soon, only Lord Kang remained beside the king. The ruler poured more wine slowly before speaking again. The remaining survivors caused no concern. Lord Kang shook his head calmly. They are watched constantly. For the first time that evening, something dark flickered quietly behind Lord Kang's eyes. The king nodded with satisfaction. "Good." A long silence followed. Then finally, Lord Kang bowed respectfully and turned to leave the chamber. Outside the secret hall, cold night air greeted him immediately. Waiting nearby stood his personal guard captain. A tall man dressed in dark armor stepped forward the moment Lord Kang appeared. "My lord." Lord Kang adjusted his gloves calmly while descending the palace steps. "Is everything still in motion?" he asked quietly. The guard captain lowered his voice carefully. "Yes, my lord." Lord Kang's expression remained unreadable. "And what I asked you to check?" The guard hesitated briefly before answering. "We are close to finding the final piece." Lord Kang finally stopped walking. The torchlight flickered softly across his face. Then slowly, very slowly, a faint smile appeared. Not warm, not kind. The smile of a man who believed history itself belonged in his hands. "Good," he said softly. His eyes darkened slightly as he looked toward the distant sleeping kingdom. Everything must be ready. While secrets quietly moved through the palace like shadows, the Crown Prince carried his own silence alone. To the kingdom, Crown Prince Junhua was a figure of strength and discipline, admired, feared by enemies beyond the borders because of his unmatched skill in battle and sharp mind. But inside the palace walls, loneliness followed him like a second shadow. Even in the afternoon light, when the sun was high and the palace looked alive, there was still something cold around him, especially after the death of his mother, Queen Hyejin, the king's second royal wife, but the only one the people of Haryun ever truly loved. Unlike the other royal women who spent their lives chasing influence inside the palace, Queen Hyejin was remembered for something different: kindness. She spoke gently to servants, helped struggling families quietly through palace charity, and even when power demanded distance, she still found ways to care for those beneath the crown. Stories often said that during harsh seasons, she would secretly send food and medicine to poor villages without the king's approval. And perhaps that quiet compassion was exactly why Junhua loved her so deeply. Her death came suddenly after a long illness the palace physicians could never fully understand. Some called it fate, others whispered darker possibilities behind closed doors. But no one dared speak too loudly, not in a palace ruled by fear. After her passing, something inside Junhua changed forever. But it wasn't only grief from losing his mother. It was the slow realization that even his father was no longer the man he once knew. Before the crown, King Seonmu had not always been king. He had once been a Gunju, a regional lord of the eastern territories of Haryun, respected for keeping order during unstable times. Junhua remembered those days clearly. His father used to smile more then, speak freely, walk among people without guards surrounding every step. Back then, He spoke of justice and rebuilding the kingdom with hope in his voice. Junhua believed in him completely. Everyone did, especially after the fall of the previous ruling house, when the kingdom was desperate for stability. He had looked like the answer, a strong leader who would bring order back to chaos. And for a time, he did, but power did not leave him unchanged. After ascending the throne, something shifted slowly, not in a single moment, but piece by piece. The kindness faded, the trust disappeared, and in its place came control, fear, and silence. Junhua often wondered whether the palace had changed his father, or whether someone inside it had shaped him into something colder over time. Because sometimes, just sometimes, he still saw glimpses of the man he once knew, but those moments never lasted long enough to trust. Now the king ruled with discipline and suspicion. Compassion had become weakness, and questions had become dangerous. So Junhua stopped asking them aloud. Instead, he buried everything inside training. In the afternoon, while the palace bustled with duties and movement, the crown prince stood alone in the royal training grounds. Sunlight cut across the courtyard in sharp golden lines, reflecting off stone and metal as guards watched from a distance. A sword rested firmly in his hand, and with every movement, he cut through the air with precision that made even the watching soldiers remain silent. Strike after strike, fast, controlled, relentless, as if he was trying to silence something deeper than exhaustion, something inside him that would not rest. The sound of steel echoed across the courtyard until finally he stopped, breathing steady, eyes focused, but not calm, never calm. Few people in the kingdom knew that Junhua was not only skilled in swordsmanship, he was also gifted in calligraphy and music, especially the traditional string instrument his mother once played for him as a child. On quieter afternoons, he would sit alone in his private chamber and play softly, as if the notes could briefly bring her memory back to life. But not today. Today, his mind was unsettled. Something had felt different since his return from the outer district. Unclear, unfinished. Serin was meant to be heading toward the storage hall. That was where newly arrived palace items were kept. Scrolls, sealed boxes, and medicinal herbs that needed sorting before evening inspection. But her steps slowed again. Her eyes kept drifting back. To him, Crown Prince Junhua. From the courtyard edge, she watched him train under the afternoon sun. Every movement he made looked controlled, sharp, almost silent in its precision. It wasn't just strength. It was discipline built from years of something deeper. Serin should have looked away, but she didn't. Something inside her kept pulling her attention back to him, as if her heart already recognized something her mind could not explain. And then, it happened. Junhua's footing slipped slightly on the stone ground. A sharp moment of imbalance. His hand hit the ground as he fell forward, a small scratch forming on his palm. A quiet pause spread across the courtyard. Before anyone else could react, Serin moved. She rushed forward immediately, ignoring the guards, ignoring the rules, ignoring the strange pull inside her chest. She grabbed the small herbal kit nearby and knelt beside him. "Your Highness," a guard started, surprised. But she was already focused. Carefully, she took his hand and began cleaning the scratch. Her movements were gentle, steady, almost instinctive, like she had done this many times before. A silence settled between them. Not awkward, not forced, just strangely heavy. Junhua watched her closely. Then, softly, he spoke. "I have been trying to speak with you." Serin's hands paused for a second. She didn't look up immediately. "You have?" she asked quietly, still focused on the wound. Junhua nodded slightly. "But every time I tried, someone was always around. The palace does not allow space for simple words anymore." Serin's chest tightened a little, but she kept her expression calm. She had to understand what was happening between them, so she asked, "Have we met before?" The question came softly, careful, almost cautious. Junhua looked at her for a moment, then slowly exhaled as if the question made sense to him. "You hit your head yesterday," he said gently, voice lowering slightly. The healer said memory might feel unclear for a while. Serin froze for a second. He believed she was confused. That made her question easier for him to answer. Junhua continued quietly, "Yes. We have met before." Serin's fingers slowed slightly as she cleaned his hand. "When I was younger, before everything in the palace changed, my mother used to take me to the healing halls." His voice softened slightly at the memory. "Queen Hyojin." Serin glanced up briefly, then back down. Junhua continued, "I was born with a weak condition. My body would often tire easily. Sometimes I would collapse without warning." He paused, then added calmly, "It was you and your mother who helped me manage it." Serin's breath caught quietly. He didn't notice her reaction. "My mother trusted your family completely," he said. "You would come often when I was younger." Quietly, without attention. "I always noticed you even when you tried to stay in the background." A faint, almost distant softness entered his expression. "And over time, I started waiting for those days without realizing why." Serin's heart tightened, but she stayed silent. Junhua looked at her more directly now. "After my father became king, things changed. People who were close to certain families began disappearing from palace attention. I realized it was safer for you to stay away from me." He paused briefly. "But I never forgot." Serin finally spoke softly. "So, that is how we know each other?" Junhua nodded once. "Yes." A faint silence followed. Then Serin carefully finished treating his hand, her thoughts spinning between confusion and emotion she didn't fully understand yet. But something still didn't fully add up. The way he looked at her didn't feel like simple memory. It felt deeper than that. Junhua slowly stood, flexing his hand slightly. His voice lowered just a little. "I heard you were injured yesterday," he said. "I tried to find a moment to speak with you, but the palace does not allow it easily." Serin looked up. "I am fine," she said softly. "Just a little shaken." Junhua nodded, then hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There is something I need to tell you tonight." Serin blinked slightly. "Tonight?" He gave a small nod. "At the place where the old lantern trees face the river." Serin hesitated for a second. She didn't recognize it, but she didn't say that. Instead, she nodded slowly, trying to follow the moment. "I will be there," she said quietly. A faint shift crossed Junhua's face, something close to relief. Not loud, not obvious, but real, like he had been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally set part of it down. "Good," he said softly. Then, as footsteps approached from the distance, his expression returned to calm control. He stepped back slightly, returning to the posture of a crown prince. But before turning away, his eyes lingered on her, just a little longer than necessary. Junhua did not show it openly. He never allowed emotions to sit too long on his face, especially inside the palace, where every expression could be turned into rumor. But as he walked away from Serin that afternoon, something inside him felt strangely lighter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. Just a quiet relief he had not felt in a long time. He had spoken to her again, finally. Even if it was brief, even if the palace kept trying to pull them apart, he found himself replaying the moment she treated his wound, her calm hands, her focused expression, the way she didn't tremble around him like others did. And for reasons he could not fully explain, he found himself hoping the night would come quickly, so he could see her again. But for Serin, the night felt different, heavier, restless. Even after she returned to the servant quarters and lay down like normal, sleep did not come easily. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the afternoon, to his voice, to his words, to the strange familiarity that kept growing between them like a memory she could not fully reach. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. But even in sleep, her mind remained unsettled. And when the palace bells quietly marked the late hour of night duty change, her eyes opened again, exactly as if something inside her had been waiting for that moment. Serin sat up slowly. The room was dark. Other servants were still asleep. Only the faint glow of moonlight slipped through the wooden window frames. She waited a moment, listening. No movement, no voices, only silence. Carefully, she stood and stepped out. Something didn't feel right. Not dangerous, but off, like the palace itself was holding its breath. As she moved through the dim corridors, she noticed it. A figure ahead, moving carefully, too carefully. Serin paused behind a pillar, her eyes narrowed slightly. It was the head court lady, Lady Han, the strict woman who controlled the entire servant quarters with iron discipline. She wasn't supposed to be walking alone at this hour, and she definitely wasn't supposed to be leaving her assigned area. Serin's curiosity tightened instantly. Slowly, quietly, she followed, keeping distance, staying in shadows. Lady Han moved through the corridors with unusual caution, avoiding main hallways and guards. This was not normal, not at all. The deeper Serin followed, the more unsettling it became. They were moving toward a restricted part of the palace. The back route, the one that led toward the inner royal chambers. Serin's heartbeat slowed. Why would she be going there? Then she saw it. The massive royal corridor leading toward the king's private quarters. 2 guards stood outside, but moments later, they stepped aside and left, just like that. as if they were expecting someone. Lady Han didn't hesitate. She walked forward and entered. The doors closed behind her. Serin froze. Her mind screamed at her to leave, but her body didn't move. A strange pull kept her there. Moments later, the door opened again, and the king stepped out. Serin's breath caught instantly. Before she could even process what she was seeing, Lady Han rushed forward and embraced him, not like a servant, not like a court official, but like someone far closer. The king's hand rested on her shoulder as he spoke quietly to her, their voices too low to hear clearly from where Serin stood. Her body went cold. What was this? A secret meeting? Or something worse? Serin instinctively stepped back, but her foot brushed lightly against the stone floor. A small sound. Too small, but not silent enough. One of the guards near the corridor turned sharply. His gaze locked in her direction. Who's there? Serin's heart dropped instantly. She turned to run, but a hand suddenly shot out from the darkness, grabbing her wrist and pulling her sharply back behind the pillar. Another hand covered her mouth instantly, stopping her breath from escaping. Her eyes widened in shock as she struggled silently, but a familiar whisper reached her ear. "Don't move." And just like that, the world outside that pillar continued completely unaware, while Serin realized she had just seen something inside the palace that was never meant to be witnessed.